It was 2 a.m. when the doorbell rang. I didn't need to look through the peephole to know my life was about to change. My daughter was on the other side, broken and bleeding. Her husband, the town's golden boy, thought he could use me as a doormat. He forgot that before I was a grandmother, I was the woman who put Al Capone wannabes behind bars. It was 2:13 in the morning when the doorbell rang. You know that sound. In the daylight it is a friendly chime announcing a package or a neighbor borrowing sugar. But in the dead of night it is a siren. It is the sound of bad news. I was already awake, sitting in my wingback chair with a cup of chamomile tea that had gone cold hours ago. Old habits die hard. I spent 40 years as a forensic accountant for the district attorney's office, tracking money through the darkest sewers of criminal organizations. Insomnia was not just a condition for me, it was a career requirement. I set my cup down on the coaster, making sure it did not make a sound. The house was silent. My husband Frank passed 3 years ago, and the silence usually felt like a heavy wool blanket. But tonight the silence felt sharp. I pulled my cardigan tighter around my shoulders and walked to the door. I did not ask who it was. I did not look through the peephole. I knew. A mother always knows when her child is in danger. It is a frequency only we can hear, like a dog whistle for the heart. I unlocked the deadbolt and turned the handle. The door swung open to reveal the heavy, stormy night of late October. And there she was, Julie, my beautiful, brilliant Julie, who had just turned 32. She was standing on my porch, shivering so violently her teeth were chattering audibly. She was wearing only a thin silk nightgown stained with mud at the hem and one slipper. The other foot was bare and bleeding slightly on the rough concrete of my porch, but it was her face that stopped my heart in my chest. Her left eye was swollen shut, a majestic and terrible purple blooming across her cheekbone. Her lip was split. Blood had dried in a dark crust on her chin. She looked at me with her one good eye, and she did not say a word. She just crumbled. I caught her before she hit the floor. You would be surprised how strong you become when your child is falling. I am 68 years old and I have arthritis in my knees, but in that moment I was made of iron. I dragged her into the foyer and kicked the door shut against the wind. I did not scream, I did not cry. Crying is for after the work is done. I guided her to the living room sofa and wrapped her in the afghan I had knitted last winter. "Stay here," I whispered. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. It was cold. It was the voice I used to use when I was testifying in court against men who had stolen millions. I went to the kitchen and grabbed a bag of frozen peas and a wet washcloth. When I came back, Julie was staring at the fireplace. Her eyes were empty. I sat beside her and gently pressed the cold cloth to her lip. She flinched. "I am sorry, baby, I am so sorry," I murmured. "Who did this?" I asked the question even though I knew the answer. We always know the answer, don't we? We just pray we are wrong. Julie took a shuddering breath. It sounded like a rattle in her chest. "Greg," she whispered. The name hung in the air like a foul smell. Greg, her husband. The man who had sat at my dining table every Sunday for 5 years. The man who had charmed me with his talk of real estate developments and community service. The man who I had thought was just a little too polished, a little too perfect. "He came home angry," she said. "He smelled like cheap perfume and whiskey." I asked him where he had been. "I just asked him where he had been, Mom." She started to sob then. A deep guttural sound that shook her entire frame. I pulled her into my arms. I rocked her back and forth while she cried onto my shoulder, staining my cardigan with her tears and the fresh blood from her lip. I let her cry. I stroked her hair, which was matted and tangled. I told her she was safe. I told her he would never touch her again. And I meant it. But I was not thinking about violence. I was not thinking about guns or baseball bats. I was thinking about leverage. I was thinking about assets. I was thinking about the way Greg's eyes shifted to the left whenever he talked about his liquidity. After an hour, Julie's sobs turned into soft hiccups. She was exhausted. I helped her up the stairs to her old bedroom. It was exactly as she had left it when she moved out 10 years ago. Posters of bands I had never heard of on the walls and a shelf full of dusty trophies. I tucked her in, pulling the duvet up to her chin. "Sleep, my love," I said. "We will fix this in the morning." She was asleep before I even closed the door. I stood in the hallway for a moment, listening to the rhythm of her breathing. My hands were shaking. I looked down at them and willed them to be still. Now was not the time for emotion. Now was the time for the audit. I went downstairs, but I did not go back to my chair. I went to the small study off the kitchen. This was my domain. It was where I kept my files, my computer, and my secrets. I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. The blue light of the screen illuminated the room. I cracked my knuckles. Greg thought he was smart. He was a developer after all. He moved money around like shells in a street game, but he made one fatal mistake. He thought I was just a grandmother. He thought I was just a nice old lady who baked cookies and knitted blankets. He forgot that I used to audit the mob. I knew their passwords. It was not hacking if your daughter gave you the information 3 years ago because she kept forgetting it. I logged into their joint checking account first. The numbers scrolled across the screen. At first glance, it looked normal. Mortgage payments, utility bills, grocery runs. But I was not looking for the normal. I was looking for the bleed. I scrolled back 6 months. There it was, cash withdrawals, $300 here, $500 there. Small enough to go unnoticed by a busy wife, but large enough to create a pattern. Then I saw the transfers, large sums moving to an LLC I did not recognize. Zenith Holdings, $5,000 in July, $10,000 in August. The account was draining. They were hemorrhaging money. I dug deeper. I pulled up the public records for Zenith Holdings. It was a shell company registered to a P.O. box in a shady part of town. I checked the signatories, and there it was, not Greg's name, but a name I didn't know. Crystal Vance. I wrote the name down on a yellow legal pad. Crystal with a K. I did a quick search. 22 years old. Recent graduate of a beauty academy. And according to her social media, she had just checked into a very expensive hotel in Cabo last month. The same week Greg said he was at a conference in Detroit. The picture was becoming clear. He was not just cheating on my daughter. He was funding his affair with their savings. But then I found something that made my blood freeze in my veins. I logged into the county property records. I wanted to check the status of the house. I had given them the down payment as a wedding gift, but my eyes drifted to another property, the 10 acres of land on the edge of town that had belonged to my father. I had transferred the deed to Julie last year, thinking it would be a nest egg for her future children. It was prime real estate, untouched and beautiful. I pulled up the deed history. My heart stopped. There was a new filing from 3 days ago, a sale. The land had been sold to a commercial developer for a fraction of its value. I clicked on the document to view the digital scan. I scrolled to the bottom to see the signatures. There was Greg's signature, sweeping and arrogant. And right next to it was Julie's signature. I stared at it. I leaned closer to the screen, taking off my reading glasses to squint. I have seen my daughter's signature thousands of times. I have seen it on birthday cards, on report cards, on checks. This was not her signature. The loops were too wide, the slant was wrong, it was a forgery. A clumsy, desperate forgery. Greg had not just beaten my daughter. He had stolen her inheritance. He had stolen my father's legacy. I felt a cold calm settle over me. It was a terrifying sensation. It was the absence of doubt. Greg had declared war. He had brought violence and theft to my doorstep. He thought he was the predator. He thought Julie was the prey. He had no idea he had just walked into the cage of a much bigger animal. I reached for the phone not to call the police but to call my old contact at the bank. It was 3 in the morning, but I knew he would answer. The audit had begun. The phone rang 3 times before a groggy voice answered on the other end. Stan was a night owl who used to run the fraud department at First National. He owed me a favor from 1998 when I kept his son out of federal prison for a computer hacking incident that got out of hand. Stan, I said, I need you to pull a transaction record. He didn't ask why, he didn't ask how I was, he just typed. The clicking of his keyboard was the only sound in the world. I gave him the transaction number from the deed transfer. He whistled low and long. Martha, this is sloppy work, he muttered. The notary stamp is from a guy in the next county who lost his license 6 months ago. And the funds were wire transferred to an account in the Cayman Islands 5 minutes after they cleared. I thanked him and hung up. I sat there in the dark for a long time. The rage was gone now. In its place was something colder and much more dangerous. Clarity. Greg was not just an abuser. He was desperate. A man who steals his wife's inheritance and wires it offshore is a man who is running out of time. He was drowning in debt, and he had used my daughter as a life raft. I looked at the clock. It was 5 in the morning. The sky outside was turning a bruised purple, matching the color of my daughter's face. I closed the laptop. I had enough for an indictment. I had enough to put him away for 10 years. But prison was too good for him. In prison he would get 3 meals a day and a gym membership. No, I wanted to take everything. I wanted to leave him with nothing but the lint in his pockets and the regret in his soul. I went to the kitchen and started a pot of coffee. The smell of the roast usually comforted me, but today it just smelled like fuel. I needed to be sharp. I cracked eggs into a bowl and whisked them violently. I needed to do something with my hands, or I was going to put my fist through the drywall. I heard the floorboards creak upstairs. Julie was awake. I wiped my hands on my apron and went to the bottom of the stairs. She was standing there looking like a ghost in the gray morning light. Her eye was swollen completely shut now, and the bruise had darkened to a sickly black. Mom, she croaked. Her voice was barely a whisper. I didn't mean to bring this to you. I walked up the stairs one by one. I took her face in my hands. Listen to me, I said firmly. You did not bring this to me. He did. And he is going to wish he hadn't. She looked at me with fear in her good eye. Are you going to call the police? I paused. The police were a blunt instrument. They were necessary, but they were slow. If we called them now, Greg would get a lawyer. He would claim self-defense or an accident. He would hide the money. He would drag Julie's name through the mud in court. No, I said, not yet. First we are going to make sure he has no money to pay for a lawyer. I led her back to bed and told her to rest. I promised her I would handle it. She trusted me. She always had. She fell back asleep, the sleep of the dead, and I went to my closet. It was time to get dressed. I pushed aside my comfortable tracksuits and reached for the back of the rack. I pulled out a floral dress with a lace collar. It was the kind of dress you wear to church or to a garden club. I put it on. I looked in the mirror. I saw an old woman. I saw a harmless grandmother with gray hair and soft eyes. I saw a victim. It was the perfect camouflage. I went to my vanity and opened the bottom drawer. Underneath a stack of old tax returns was a small velvet bag. I opened it and took out a set of keys. They were the spare keys to Julie and Greg's house. Julie had given them to me years ago for emergencies. Greg probably didn't even know I had them. I put them in my purse along with a batch of freshly baked oatmeal cookies I had pulled from the freezer. I looked at myself one last time in the mirror. Who would suspect the lady with the cookies? Who would think that underneath the lace and the floral print was a predator waiting to strike? I walked out to my car. The morning air was crisp, the neighborhood was waking up. People were walking their dogs and picking up newspapers. They waved at me, I waved back. "Good morning, Martha," they called out. "Lovely day, isn't it?" I smiled my sweetest smile. "It certainly is," I said. I got into my sedan and started the engine. I wasn't going to the police station, I was going to the lion's den. I was going to Greg's house to play the role of a lifetime. He thought he had broken my daughter. He was about to find out that he had just woken up the auditor. And I was coming to collect. I pulled into the driveway of the colonial house that sat on the corner of Elm and Maple. It was a beautiful house. It had white pillars and a manicured lawn that was the envy of the neighborhood. It looked like the American dream. I should know because I paid for the down payment. But as I stared at the front door, I felt a wave of nausea. This wasn't a home anymore. It was a crime scene. I checked my rearview mirror. My hair was perfectly coiffed. My lipstick was a soft shade of pink. I looked like I was about to head to a bake sale. I took a deep breath. This was the performance of my life. If I showed even a flicker of the rage that was burning a hole in my stomach, Greg would shut down. He would lawyer up. He would hide the assets better than he already had. I needed him to feel safe. I needed him to feel superior. I needed him to think I was just a confused old woman who missed her daughter. I grabbed the tin of oatmeal raisin cookies from the passenger seat. They were Greg's favorite. The irony tasted bitter in my mouth. I walked up the path and rang the bell. I waited. I knew he was home. His oversized truck was in the driveway. It took a long time for the door to open. When it finally did, Greg stood there. He looked terrible. His eyes were bloodshot and he was wearing the same clothes he must have had on last night. His shirt was wrinkled and unbuttoned at the top. He smelled like stale bourbon and fear. When he saw me, his eyes widened. He gripped the doorframe. "Martha." He said my name like it was a question. He was scanning my face, looking for accusations, looking for knowledge. I smiled. It was the hardest thing I have ever done. "Good morning, Gregory," I chirped. "I hope I am not waking you. I tried to call Julie, but she isn't picking up her cell. I know it is early, but I was baking and thought you two might want some fresh cookies." I held up the tin like a peace offering. I watched his shoulders drop. The tension left his body. He bought it. He actually bought it. He thought I was standing there oblivious to the fact that he had beaten my daughter half to death just 6 hours ago. That is the thing about narcissists. They think everyone else is stupid. They think they are the main character in the movie and the rest of us are just extras. "Oh, Martha. Come in." He stepped back, opening the door wide. "Julie isn't here actually. She went to stay with a friend last night. We had a little disagreement. You know how she gets?" He let out a nervous chuckle. I stepped into the foyer. The smell hit me instantly. Bleach, strong chemical bleach. He had been cleaning. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I kept my smile plastered on my face. "Oh, you know Julie," I said, waving my hand dismissively. "She always was a dramatic girl. She probably just needs to cool off. She will be back by dinner, I am sure." I walked past him into the living room. My eyes were scanning everything. I was not looking at the decor, I was looking for holes, I was looking for blood. The living room was too clean. The rug was slightly askew. The coffee table had been moved a few inches to the left. I noticed a vase was missing from the mantelpiece, the blooming vase I had given them for their anniversary. It was gone, shattered likely. I sat down on the armchair, the one that faced the hallway. Greg hovered by the entrance, wringing his hands. He didn't know what to do with me. I was a variable he hadn't calculated. "Would you like some coffee, Martha?" he asked. He wanted to leave the room. He wanted to get away from my gaze, even though he thought it was benign. "That would be lovely, Gregory," I said, "and maybe a glass of water. I am so parched." He nodded and practically ran to the kitchen. As soon as he was gone, I moved. I didn't move like an old lady. I moved like a viper. I reached into my purse. I didn't have high-tech FBI bugs. I had something better. I had a small digital voice recorder, the kind I used to use for depositions. It was small, black, and had a battery life of 48 hours. I reached under the cushion of the sofa, the one where he always sat to watch football. I slid the recorder deep into the crevice. It would pick up everything. His phone calls, his murmurs, his lies. I sat back down and smoothed my skirt just as he walked back in. He was carrying a mug of coffee and his hands were shaking. He handed it to me. The liquid sloshed over the side. Nervous Gregory, I thought you should be. I took a sip. It was terrible, bitter and burnt, just like him. So tell me, I said, keeping my voice light, what was this disagreement about? I hope it wasn't about money. I know the market has been tough lately. I watched his face closely. This was the test. I wanted to see how he lied. He stiffened. Oh no, nothing like that. He said quickly, too quickly, just silly stuff. She wants to go on vacation and I have been so busy with work. You know how it is. I nodded sympathetically. Of course, you work so hard. I have always admired that about you. I flattered him. I fed his ego. It was disgusting, but it was necessary. When you feed a shark, it opens its mouth, and when it opens its mouth, you can see the rows of teeth. He relaxed completely then. He sat down on the sofa right on top of the recorder. He took a cookie from the tin and bit into it. He was eating the cookies of the woman whose daughter he had assaulted. The audacity was breathtaking. I needed to get him out of the house. I needed him to feel like he had won so he would make a mistake. Well, I shouldn't keep you, I said, standing up. I just wanted to drop these off. Tell Julie to call me when she is done pouting. I walked towards the door. He followed me, eager to get me out. He opened the door for me. Thanks, Martha. You are the best, he said. He actually smiled, a smug, satisfied smile. He thought he had dodged a bullet. He thought he was in the clear. I walked to my car and got in. I waved as I backed out of the driveway. I kept the smile on my face until I turned the corner. Then I let it drop. I pulled over to the side of the road and gripped the steering wheel. My knuckles were white. I wanted to go back there and burn the house down. But I couldn't, not yet. I had planted the seed. Now I had to wait for it to grow. I looked at the passenger seat. I had left the cookies, but I had taken something else. While he was in the kitchen getting the coffee, I had swiped something from the side table. A receipt. It was crumpled and stained with coffee rings. I unfolded it. It was from a jewelry store in the city. A purchase made yesterday at noon. A diamond tennis bracelet. Value $5,000. I laughed. A cold, hard laugh. Julie didn't wear tennis bracelets. She thought they were tacky. This wasn't for her. This was for the mistress, and he had bought it with the money he stole from my land. I put the receipt in my purse. It was Exhibit A. I put the car in drive. I had the recorder. I had the receipt. And I had the knowledge that Greg was terrified. He was sloppy, and sloppy men make mistakes. I was going to be there to catch every single one of them. I drove 3 blocks before I pulled over again. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. It was adrenaline. That cold electric current that used to keep me awake during racketeering trials in the 90s. I looked at the receipt in my hand. Emerald and Stone Jewelers, downtown. Date yesterday. Time 12:45 p.m. Item 3-carat diamond tennis bracelet. Price $5,400. Paid via debit ending in 8891. I knew that card number. It was the joint business account. The one meant for property maintenance. Greg wasn't just cheating, he was stupid. He was leaving a paper trail a mile wide, illuminated by neon lights. He was buying diamonds for a mistress, while my daughter was couponing for groceries to save for a baby. The rage flared up again, hot and sharp, but I swallowed it down. Rage is fuel, but only if you put it in the engine. If you spill it, you just burn the house down. I drove home. The house was quiet when I entered. I found Julie sitting at the kitchen table. She had tried to cover the bruise with makeup, but it looked worse. Like a storm cloud trying to hide behind a thin veil of beige. She was staring at her phone, her thumb hovering over the call button on Greg's contact. "Don't," I said, dropping my keys on the counter. She jumped, looking at me with wide, terrified eyes. "Mom, he's going to be so mad I'm not there. He'll say I abandoned him. He will say nothing," I interrupted, pouring myself a fresh cup of coffee. "Because he thinks you are pouting." "I just came from there," Julie gasped. "You went to the house. Did he hurt you?" "He ate an oatmeal cookie and complained about his workload," I said dryly. "He thinks I'm a senile old woman who just wants everyone to get along. And we are going to let him keep thinking that." I sat down across from her and took her hands. They were cold. "Julie, I need you to listen to me. This isn't a marriage anymore. It's a hostage situation, and I am the negotiator. But to get you out, I need you to be strong. Can you do that?" She nodded slowly, tears leaking from her good eye. "What do I do? You stay here, you don't answer the phone, you don't log into social media, you disappear. Let him sweat, let him wonder." I left her with a stack of magazines and went back to my study. It was time to find the girl. I had the name from the bank records. Crystal Vance. I had purchase the bracelet. Now I needed a location. I didn't use high-tech software. I used Facebook. People like Crystal, young and vain, they live their lives in public. They document every meal, every outfit, every gift. It took me 5 minutes to find her profile. It was public, of course. There she was, Crystal Vance. Blonde extensions, pouty lips, and a bio that read, "Living my best life, realtor in training." I scrolled down, and there it was, a photo posted 6 hours ago. Crystal holding up a wrist, adorned with a sparkling diamond tennis bracelet. The caption read, "Daddy spoils me rotten. Hashtag love him, hashtag future misses." I felt a wave of disgust so potent I could taste bile. Daddy, she was talking about Greg, my son-in-law, the man who had kicked my daughter while she was down. But the hashtag caught my eye, future misses. He had promised her marriage. He was telling her he was going to leave Julie. That was the hook. I clicked on the About section. Works at Prestige Realty Group. I sat back in my chair. Prestige Realty, that was right across town. I looked at the clock. It was 11 a.m. Lunch hour was approaching. I printed the screenshot of the bracelet. I printed the bank statement showing the withdrawal from Julie's account. I printed the forged land deed. I put them all in a crisp manila envelope. I wasn't going to yell at Crystal. I wasn't going to pull her hair or call her names. That's what they expect. That's the soap opera drama. I was going to do something much more effective. I was going to show her the books. I was going to show her that her daddy wasn't a millionaire. He was a fraud, and she wasn't the love of his life. She was just another liability he couldn't afford. I stood up and grabbed my coat. I didn't need the floral dress anymore. I put on my tailored gray blazer. The one I used to wear when I had to tell CEOs they were being indicted. "Where are you going?" Julie called out from the living room. I paused at the door, checking my reflection. The grandmother was gone, the auditor was back. "I'm going to have a little chat with the other woman," I said. "I think it's time she learned how to balance a checkbook." Prestige Realty was located in a strip mall, sandwiched between a dry cleaner and a smoothie shop. It was the kind of place that had gold lettering on the window, but cheap laminate flooring inside. I parked my sedan 2 spots away from a bright yellow convertible that I guessed belonged to Crystal. I took a moment to center myself. I checked the manila envelope in my passenger seat. It contained the autopsy of a relationship, the bank statements, the property deed, the credit report I had pulled while Julie was in the shower. It was a weapon far more dangerous than a gun. It was the truth. I picked it up and stepped out into the bright noon sun. I walked into the office. The air conditioning was blasting, and it smelled like vanilla car air freshener. There were 3 desks, but only one was occupied. A young woman sat behind a large glass table, typing furiously on her phone. She looked exactly like her pictures. Blonde hair that was just a shade too platinum to be natural. Long acrylic nails painted a neon pink. She was wearing a tight blazer that looked uncomfortable. I walked up to the desk. She did not look up. I cleared my throat. "Excuse me," I said. My voice was polite, but it had the weight of a gavel. She looked up then. Her eyes were wide and blue-lined with heavy black makeup. "Can I help you?" she asked. She popped a bubble of gum. She looked me up and down. She saw the gray blazer. She saw the sensible shoes. She decided instantly that I was not important. I was just an old lady probably looking for a condo or a rental. She did not know I was the Grim Reaper. "I am looking for Crystal Vance," I said. She smiled a practiced customer service smile. "That is me. How can I help you today? Are you looking to buy or sell?" She leaned forward and the diamond bracelet on her wrist caught the light. It sparkled violently. It was the exact bracelet from the receipt. 3 carats of stolen money hanging off her wrist like a shackle. "I am not here to buy a house, Crystal," I said. I placed the manila envelope on the glass desk with a heavy thud. "I am here about Gregory Miller." The smile vanished from her face instantly. It was replaced by a look of pure panic. Her eyes darted to the door as if she expected him to walk in. "Who are you?" she whispered. "Are you his wife?" I almost laughed. "I am not his wife," I said. "I am his mother-in-law." Crystal flinched as if I had slapped her. She started to stand up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I do not want any trouble," she stammered. "I think you should leave." She reached for the phone on her desk. I did not move. I did not raise my voice. I just looked at her. "Sit down, Crystal," I said. "I am not here to pull your hair. I am not here to make a scene. I am here to save you from going to prison." Her hand hovered over the phone receiver. She looked at me confused. "Prison," she repeated. "Yes," I said. I pulled out the chair across from her and sat down uninvited. "You see that bracelet on your wrist? It is beautiful. But do you know how he paid for it?" She pulled her arm back, tucking it under the desk. "He bought it for me," she said defensively. "Because he loves me. He is leaving his wife." "He told me," I nodded slowly. "Of course he told you that. They always say that. But here is what he did not tell you." I opened the envelope. I slid the bank statement across the glass. "Look at the highlighted line, Crystal. Look at the date. Look at the account number." She looked down. She did not want to look, but she could not help it. I watched her eyes scan the numbers. "That is a joint business account," I explained. "It is money that belongs to my daughter. And by accepting a gift purchased with stolen funds, you are technically an accessory to embezzlement. And since the amount is over $5,000, that makes it a felony in this state." Crystal went pale. Her mouth opened but no sound came out. She looked like a child who had been caught stealing candy. But I did not stop there. I pulled out the second paper. It was Greg's credit report. "This is the man you think is rich," I said. "Look at the numbers, Crystal. He is $300,000 in debt. He has maxed out 4 credit cards. The truck he drives. Leased. The house he lives in. Mortgaged to the hilt. He is not a tycoon. He is a drowning man. And he is using you as a life vest." She stared at the paper. Tears started to well up in her eyes. "But he said he was a developer," she whispered. "He said he had millions in assets. He took me to Cabo." I leaned in closer. He took you to Cabo on a credit card that is now in collections, I said. I watched the reality sink in. It was cruel, I know, to shatter a young girl's fantasy like that. But she needed to wake up. She was sleeping with a monster and she thought she was dating a prince. I saw the change happen in her face. The fear turned into something else, doubt, then anger. She looked at the bracelet on her wrist, she looked at the papers, she looked at me. You are lying, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Why would you help me? You should hate me. I sat back. I do not hate you, Crystal, I said. You are young, you are stupid, but you are not evil. Greg is the evil one. He lied to my daughter for 5 years. He beat her last night until she could barely walk, and he lied to you too. He is never going to marry you. He needs my daughter's inheritance to pay off his debts. Once he drains that account, he will dump you and find the next girl who believes his stories. Crystal gasped. He hit her, she asked. I nodded. I pulled out my phone. I had taken a picture of Julie this morning. I showed it to her. Crystal stared at the swollen purple face of my daughter. She covered her mouth with her hand. Oh my God, she breathed. He told me she was crazy. He said she fell down the stairs. He is a liar, Crystal, I said, and right now you are the only one who can stop him. I put the phone away. I need you to make a choice. You can keep wearing that bracelet and wait for the police to come for it. Or you can help me take him down. If you help me, I will make sure your name stays out of the indictment. I will make sure you walk away clean. She looked at me. She was trembling. She was just a girl, really. A girl who liked shiny things and bad boys. She was not a criminal mastermind. She was collateral damage. What do I have to do? She asked. Her voice was small. I smiled. It was the first genuine smile I had felt all day. I reached into the envelope and pulled out the last piece of paper. It was a printout of the text messages she had sent him, the ones where she asked about the money. I need you to send him a message, I said. I need you to tell him you need to see him tonight. Tell him it is an emergency. Tell him you are pregnant. Her eyes went wide. But I am not pregnant, she said. I know, I said, but he does not know that. And a man like Greg, when he hears that, he will panic. And when he panics, he will talk. And when he talks, we will be listening. Crystal stared at her phone, her thumb hovering over the screen. Her acrylic nail tapped a nervous rhythm against the glass. I can't, she whispered. He'll kill me if he hit your daughter. He won't touch you, I said, my voice dropping to that low, terrifying register I used to reserve for cross-examinations. Because you are going to tell him over text, and then you are going to put the phone on the desk on speaker, and you are going to let me listen. She swallowed hard, looking at the photo of Julie's bruised face one last time. It was the vanity that got her. Not the morality, but the vanity. She couldn't imagine her own pretty face looking like that. She typed the message. I watched the words appear. Greg, we have a problem. I'm late. I think I'm pregnant. Send it, I commanded. She pressed send. The 3 dots of anticipation appeared almost instantly. Greg was glued to his phone. He was probably sitting in his truck right now, hyperventilating. The phone rang. The screen lit up with a picture of Greg smiling, wearing sunglasses. Crystal jumped. Answer it, I said. Speaker. She tapped the green button with a shaking hand. Crystal. Greg's voice filled the small office. He sounded frantic. What the hell did you just text me? You can't be pregnant. We were careful. I signaled Crystal to stick to the script. She cleared her throat, her voice trembling just the right amount. Well, I am, and I don't know what to do, Greg. My rent is due and now this. I'm scared. Don't be scared, just listen, don't tell anyone, Greg hissed. Especially not anyone at work. I'm handling things. I'm moving some assets around. The old bat. Martha. She's clueless. I just need a few more days to get her to sign over the final rights to the trust. I felt a cold smile touch my lips. The old bat. But I need money now, Greg. Crystal whined, playing her part perfectly. Doctors cost money, I know, he shouted and Crystal flinched. I'm selling the land, okay? I finalized the paperwork this morning. I'll have 50 grand in cash by Friday. Just keep your mouth shut until then. If you ruin this for me, Crystal, I swear to God. He trailed off, the threat hanging heavy in the vanilla-scented air. Okay, Crystal whispered. Friday, he snapped. The line went dead. Silence filled the room. Crystal looked at me, her eyes wide. He admitted it, she said softly. He said he finalized the paperwork. He said he forged it. I corrected, reaching over and stopping the recording app on my own phone, which had been running the entire time. Or at least he came close enough for a jury to connect the dots. I stood up, smoothing down my blazer. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a deep, weary satisfaction. I had turned his mistress into a witness, and his arrogance into evidence. What happens now? Crystal asked. She looked smaller now, the bravado stripped away. Now, I said, picking up my purse, you wait. If he calls, you don't answer. You let him sweat. You let him think the walls are closing in, because they are. I walked to the door, then paused, and Crystal, take that bracelet off, it's evidence. I suggest you put it in a safe place until the police ask for it. I walked out into the sunshine. The parking lot was bright and hot, but I felt cold. I got into my car and sat there for a moment. I had him. I had the financial trail, I had the mistress. I had the admission on tape, but it wasn't enough. Greg was desperate now. He had promised money he didn't have to a woman he didn't love, all to cover debts he couldn't pay. A desperate man is a dangerous man. If I went to the police now, he might run. He might disappear with whatever cash he could scrape together. Or worse, he might come back for Julie to silence her. No, I needed to trap him. I needed to put him in a room where he couldn't run, surrounded by witnesses, thinking he was about to win the lottery. I drove home, my mind racing. I needed a setting, a stage for the final act. I pulled into my driveway and saw Julie sitting on the porch, wrapped in a shawl. She looked fragile, like a piece of china that had been glued back together. I walked up the steps. It's done, I said. Crystal is on our side. Julie looked at me, stunned. How? I showed her the math, I said simply. But we are not finished. Greg is expecting a payday on Friday. We need to make sure he comes to get it. I sat down next to her on the swing. Julie, I need you to do something very difficult. I need you to call him. I can't, she whispered, shrinking back. You have to, I said firmly. I need you to call him and tell him that I am sick, very sick. Tell him the stress of the last few days has been too much for my heart. Tell him I am dying. Julie stared at me. Mom, what are you talking about? I am talking about Allure, honey, I said, looking out at the oak tree in the front yard. Greg wants the money, he wants the inheritance. Fine. We are going to offer it to him. We are going to invite him to a family meeting to discuss my will. He won't be able to resist. He will come thinking he is about to sign the papers to become a millionaire. I turned to her, my eyes hard. And when he sits down at that table to sign, he won't find a will. He will find the police. The stage was set. I have always believed that a lie is only as good as its details, and I was about to paint a masterpiece. We spent the morning turning my living room into a hospice. I went to the linen closet and pulled out the old medical supplies from when Frank was in his final days. A dusty oxygen tank that was empty but looked imposing, a walker with tennis balls on the feet, several bottles of pills that were actually just vitamins, and breath mints transferred into orange prescription vials. I placed them strategically on the coffee table, next to a glass of water and a box of tissues. The room smelled of lavender and sickness. I closed the heavy velvet drapes, blocking out the cheerful afternoon sun. casting the room into a somber church-like gloom. He's going to know, Julie said, her voice trembling. She was pacing the kitchen, wringing her hands until her knuckles were white. Mom, he's not stupid. If he sees you look healthy, he'll know it's a trap. He won't see me looking healthy, I said calmly, dipping a makeup sponge into a pot of pale gray eyeshadow. I dabbed it under my eyes, creating hollow, exhausted circles. I put a touch of powder on my lips to drain the color from them. I wrapped a thick woolen shawl around my shoulders and hunched my posture, letting my spine curve into the shape of a frail, defeated woman. I looked in the hallway mirror. The transformation was terrifying. The sharp-eyed auditor was gone. In her place was a dying grandmother. Now, I said, handing Julie her phone, call him, put it on speaker. You need to sound hysterical. You need to sound like your world is ending. Julie took the phone as if it were a live grenade. She dialed. The ringing sound echoed in the silent kitchen. 1 ring. 2 rings. Yeah, Greg's voice answered, clipped and impatient. He was probably busy moving money around, trying to cover his tracks before Friday. Greg, Julie sobbed. She didn't have to act. The fear was real. It's Mom. She collapsed. There was a silence on the other end. What do you mean collapsed? Her heart. Julie stammered, looking at me for guidance. I nodded encouragingly, mouthing the words power of attorney. The doctor was just here. He said it's bad, Greg. She's refusing to go to the hospital. She wants to die at home, but she's frantic about the will. She wants to sign over the estate before she goes. The change in Greg's tone was instantaneous. It was like hearing a slot machine hit the jackpot. The estate? He asked, his voice suddenly dripping with fake concern. Is she lucid? Can she sign papers? Yes, but she's fading fast, Julie cried. She keeps asking for you. She says she trusts you to handle the properties. Please, Greg, can you come over? She has the notary coming in an hour. I'm on my way, Greg said. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Keep her awake, Julie. Don't let her fall asleep. The line went dead. I looked at Julie and let out a long, slow breath. He took the bait. The shark smelled blood in the water. I moved to the recliner in the living room and settled in. I arranged the Afghan over my legs. I placed the oxygen mask loosely around my neck. Now came the hard part, the waiting. 20 minutes feels like a lifetime when you are waiting for the man who beat your child to walk through the door. I closed my eyes and focused on my breathing. I needed to lower my heart rate. I needed to be convincing. I heard the rumble of his truck in the driveway. Exactly 18 minutes later, he was speeding. Greed has a heavy foot. I heard the car door slam. Then the heavy tread of his boots on the porch steps. The doorbell didn't ring. He just opened the door. He walked in like he owned the place. Julie, he called out. Where is she? Julie stepped out of the kitchen. She looked small and terrified, hugging her arms around herself. In here, she whispered. Please be quiet. She's very weak. Greg walked into the living room. He was wearing his business clothes, a polo shirt with a logo and khakis, but he looked disheveled. He stopped when he saw me. I let my head loll to the side, my eyes half open, staring blankly at the wall. I let out a wheezing cough. Martha, he said, stepping closer. He didn't sound sad. He sounded like an appraiser looking at a damaged piece of furniture. Can you hear me? I turned my head slowly, painfully. I focused my eyes on him, making them wide and watery. Gregory, I rasped. You came. He knelt beside the chair. He smelled of sweat and that expensive cologne he bought with my money. He took my hand. His palm was damp. Of course I came, Martha. I'm family. Julie said you wanted to talk about the arrangements. He couldn't help himself. He couldn't even wait 5 minutes before bringing up the money. Yes, I whispered, squeezing his hand with a weak, trembling grip. I don't have much time. The stress, my heart couldn't take it. I need to know. That Julie will be taken care of, she will be, Greg said, nodding vigorously. I'll take care of everything. You just need to sign the power of attorney, Martha. Transfer the control of the accounts to me so I can pay the medical bills, the land too. I wheezed, the 10 acres. I want you to have it all. I saw the flash of triumph in his eyes. It was ugly and naked. He thought he had won. He thought the old woman was dying and handing him the keys to the kingdom. He didn't notice that my grip on his hand wasn't actually weak. He didn't notice that the oxygen tank wasn't turned on. He was blinded by the glare of gold. That's a good decision, Martha. He said, patting my hand. Where are the papers? Is the notary here yet? He is, I said, my voice suddenly becoming a little stronger, a little less raspy. He is waiting in the kitchen. Greg stood up eager. Great. Let's get him in here. Let's get this done so you can rest. He turned toward the kitchen, smile playing on his lips. He was 3 steps away from the door when it swung open. But it wasn't a notary who walked out. It was not a notary. It was Detective Harris, a man I had worked with on the city's fraud task force for 15 years. He was 6'4", wore a cheap suit that strained at the shoulders, and had a face carved out of granite. Behind him stood 2 uniformed officers, their hands resting casually on their belts. Greg froze mid-step. His smile faltered, twitching at the corners like a glitching video. Who are you? He stammered, looking back at me, then at Julie, then back at the giant of a man blocking his path. Detective Harris, Economic Crimes, Harris said, his voice a deep rumble that seemed to vibrate the floorboards. Gregory Miller. Greg laughed, a nervous high-pitched sound. There must be a mistake. We're having a family meeting. My mother-in-law is dying. She needs a notary, not the police. He turned to me, his eyes pleading. Martha, tell them to leave. I sat up. I threw off the Afghan. I pulled the oxygen mask from around my neck and let it drop to the floor. I stood up straight, my spine uncurling, the frail old woman shedding her skin to reveal the predator underneath. I wiped the gray powder from my lips with the back of my hand. I am not dying, Gregory, I said. My voice was clear, it was sharp. It was the voice that had made grown men cry in deposition rooms. But your lifestyle is. Greg stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on a dock. What? But you said. I lied, I said, stepping toward him. Just like you lied to my daughter. Just like you lied to the bank. Just like you lied to Crystal. At the mention of her name, Greg flinched as if I had struck him. He looked around the room, finally noticing the details he had missed in his greed. The empty oxygen tank, the vitamin bottles, the trap. You set me up, he hissed, his face turning a mottled red. He took a step toward me, his hands curling into fists. You crazy old witch, you set me up. Take a step back, Mr. Miller, Detective Harris said, stepping into the room. The 2 uniformed officers moved forward, flanking Greg. This is entrapment, Greg shouted, pointing a shaking finger at me. She lured me here. Anything I said is inadmissible. I walked over to the coffee table and picked up the decorative flower pot. I reached inside and pulled out the digital recorder I had planted there 20 minutes ago. The red light was still blinking steadily. It is not entrapment if you confess to a private citizen in a private residence, Gregory, I said calmly, and besides, we are not arresting you for what you said today. We are arresting you for what you did yesterday. I nodded to Harris. He pulled a folded warrant from his jacket pocket. Gregory Miller, you are under arrest for grand larceny, forgery in the 1st degree, and felony assault. Harris read. We have the bank records. We have the forged deed. We have the statement from Ms. Crystal Vance regarding the embezzlement of funds. And we have the medical report from the emergency room regarding your wife's injuries. Greg looked at Julie. She was standing in the doorway of the kitchen, tears streaming down her face, but she was standing tall. She wasn't hiding anymore, Julie. Greg pleaded, his voice cracking. Baby, please, tell them. Tell them it was an accident. Tell them I love you, we can fix this. I did it for us. Julie looked at him. She looked at the man she had married, the man she had feared, the man who was currently trying to manipulate her one last time. She took a deep breath. You didn't do it for us, Greg, she said softly. You did it for yourself. And the only thing you're going to fix is a license plate in the state penitentiary. Cuff him. Harris ordered. The officers moved in. They grabbed Greg's arms and spun him around. The click of the handcuffs was the loudest sound in the room. It was a beautiful sound. A sound of finality. Greg started to struggle, shouting obscenities, calling me names that would make a sailor blush. They dragged him out the door, his boots scraping against the hardwood floor he would never walk on again. I followed them onto the porch. The neighborhood was watching. Mrs. Higgins from next door was peering through her blinds. The mailman had stopped his truck. They watched as the golden boy of the neighborhood was shoved into the back of a squad car like a common criminal. Harris stopped at the bottom of the steps and looked up at me. He tipped his head. Nice work, Martha. You haven't lost your touch. I told you, Harris, I said, wrapping my shawl tighter against the afternoon breeze. I always balance the books. He grinned and got into his unmarked car. I watched them drive away, the red and blue lights flashing against the trees. I turned back to the house. Julie was sitting on the porch swing, her head in her hands. She was shaking. I sat down beside her and put my arm around her. It's over, I said. He is gone. She looked up at me. He looked so small, she whispered. When they put the handcuffs on him, he just looked small. Bullies always do, I said. When you take away their fear, they shrink. I looked out at the street. The sun was setting now, casting long shadows across the lawn. The adrenaline was fading, leaving me exhausted. My knees ached. My back hurt. I felt every minute of my 68 years. But I also felt something else, peace. The audit was complete. The liability had been removed. Now the rebuilding could begin. But as I sat there holding my daughter, I knew there was one last loose end. The money. Greg had spent a lot of it. The house was likely in foreclosure. The credit cards were maxed. We had won the war, but the battlefield was still a mess. I patted Julie's hand. Go inside and make us some tea, honey. I have one more call to make. Who are you calling? She asked, wiping her eyes. The bank, I said, pulling out my phone. I need to see if we can save the house. And then, I think I need to bake some real cookies. I have a feeling the neighbors are going to have a lot of questions. They say the wheels of justice grind slow, but I have found that they move a lot faster when you grease them with a 3-inch stack of forensic evidence. It had been 6 months since the day Greg was dragged off my porch in handcuffs. 6 months of depositions and hearings, and lawyers trying to wiggle out of the truth. But today was the end of the line. Today was the sentencing. I sat in the front row of the county courthouse. I was wearing my best navy blue suit. It was the same suit I wore 20 years ago, when I put away the corrupt mayor of our town. Beside me sat Julie. She looked different now. The bruises had faded long ago, leaving no mark on her skin. But the change was deeper than that. She sat straighter. Her hair was cut in a sharp bob that framed her face. She was not the scared girl hiding in my kitchen anymore. She was a survivor. When the bailiff announced the judge, we all stood. Then they brought Greg in. I almost didn't recognize him. The expensive suits were gone, replaced by a bright orange jumpsuit that washed out his complexion. He had lost weight. His hair, which he used to gel so meticulously, was limp and grown out. He shuffled in with his ankles shackled. The sound of the chains clinking against the floor was a stark contrast to the confident stride he used to have. He did not look at us. He stared at the floor. The prosecutor read the charges again. Grand larceny, forgery, assault, usury. It was a laundry list of greed and stupidity. Crystal Vance sat 3 rows behind us. She had kept her end of the bargain. She testified about the texts and the hidden cash and the lies. In exchange she got probation. She looked tired, but she was free. She had learned a hard lesson about what glitters. Greg's lawyer tried to beg for leniency. He talked about Greg's difficult childhood and financial stress. He called it a momentary lapse in judgment. I let out a small scoff that echoed in the quiet room. A momentary lapse is forgetting to pay a parking ticket, systematically stealing your wife's inheritance, and beating her when she asks questions is not a lapse. It is a character defect. Judge Patterson peered over his glasses at Greg. Mr. Miller, he said, your mother-in-law described your actions as an audit of your character, and I have to say you have come up bankrupt. The courtroom remained silent. The judge continued, I am sentencing you to 12 years in the state penitentiary, with no possibility of parole for the first 8. You are also ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $400,000. The gavel banged. It sounded like a gunshot. Greg slumped in his chair. He finally looked back at us. His eyes met mine. There was no hate in them anymore, just a vast empty regret. I didn't smile, I didn't gloat, I just nodded. The transaction was complete, the account was closed. We walked out of the courthouse into the blinding spring sunshine. The reporters were there, of course. The story of the grandma who set a trap for the conman's son-in-law had made the local news. They shouted questions. Martha, how do you feel? Julie, is it over? We ignored them. We walked to my car in silence. When we got inside, Julie let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for half a year. It is really over, Mom, she said. He is gone, yes, I said, starting the engine, but we have one more stop to make. Where? She asked. The bank, I said. Julie's face fell. Mom, the house, we are going to lose it, aren't we? I know the mortgage is months behind and the liens. I reached over and patted her hand. Julie, listen to me. Do you remember what I did for a living? I did not just catch bad guys. I found the money they hid. We drove to the First National Bank. We met with the branch manager in a glass office. He had a stack of papers waiting for us. Julie looked at them confused. What is this? She asked. This, I explained, is something called innocent spouse relief. It is a tax provision, but there are similar clauses for banking fraud. Because we proved that Greg forged your signature on the loans and the land sale, the bank cannot hold you liable for the debt. The liens on the house have been dissolved. The credit card debt has been transferred solely to Greg's name. Julie looked at the manager, then at me. Her mouth fell open. You mean? I mean the house is yours, I said, free and clear, and the land, my father's land. We got the deed back this morning. The sale was voided because of the forgery. Julie started to cry, but this time they were happy tears. She hugged me right there in the bank office. You saved everything, Mom, she sobbed. I hugged her back. I didn't save everything. I thought I couldn't save the 5 years she wasted on him. I couldn't save her from the pain of the memories, but I saved her future, and that was enough. That evening we sat on my back porch. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. We were drinking iced tea. The air smelled of blooming jasmine. It was peaceful, the kind of peace you have to fight for. Julie turned to me. Mom, she said, I have been thinking. I don't want to live in that big house anymore. It has too many ghosts. I nodded. I understand. What do you want to do? She looked out at the yard. I want to sell it. And I want to build a small cottage on Grandpa's land, something just for me, and maybe a nursery. I looked at her sharply. a nursery. She smiled a shy, secretive smile. I took a test this morning. I thought it was just stress making me late. But it is not. My heart swelled. A baby. A new life. Greg would never know. He had lost his rights when he raised his hand against her. This baby would grow up safe. This baby would grow up loved. And this baby would grow up knowing that their grandmother was not someone to be trifled with. I raised my glass of tea. To new beginnings, I said. To new beginnings, Julie echoed. So there you have it. That is the story of how I audited my son-in-law and balanced the books of justice. It wasn't easy, it wasn't pretty, but sometimes you have to get your hands dirty to clean up the mess. I know there are some of you listening right now who are in the same boat. Maybe you have a son-in-law who talks down to you. Maybe you have a daughter who is fading away before your eyes. Maybe you feel like you are just an old woman and there is nothing you can do. Well, let me tell you something. You have a lifetime of wisdom. You have eyes that see everything, and you have a strength that these young men cannot even imagine. Don't let them underestimate you. If you see something, say something. If you smell a rat, buy a trap. And remember, the truth is like a line of credit. Eventually everyone has to pay up. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had to step in to protect your child from their spouse? I read every single comment. Until next time, stay sharp and keep your receipts.